Hey everybody, welcome to SpeekyGeeky, your one-stop shop for all things fandom. This is our very first podcast. I'm here with Brandon Rosenstein.
Hello.
And we're going to be discussing our top 3
animated series of the past 25 years.
This is going to be an ongoing that'll focus on our favorite animated series of
that time frame.
If you enjoy animation, if you enjoy great story, and you haven't seen these, you're not going to be disappointed by these options. It's hard for me to say that this is like in a specific order because all of these are also my top 1. The first one that I had on my list was Batman the Animated Series.
That's a good one.
Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, to me is the quintessential Batman stories. There never was anything to this level of quality before and style before with the Batman. Every iteration has its own feel to it, and it has its own quirkiness to it. This series came out in the early 90s. It was around the same time as Warner Brothers was putting out a bunch of brand new animation. It was around the same time as like Tiny Toons. It was a little dark for the time, honestly, for what you were used to as kid shows. As a, like a child, I felt like this was something that was almost meant for grown-ups, the kind of stories that were being told with it. Obviously, they can't show you death, and they couldn't show you uber violence. And, part of the running joke with it is just how bad the henchman's aim always was, because they'd be just littered with bullets, and no one ever hit Batman. But it still felt like it was something really exciting that you got to watch. And every episode was some brand new adventure. This is also where Harley Quinn came in. What really drew me towards, at the time, felt like were second-tier characters that they gave the spotlight and made you to feel more for them. Like characters like Clayface and Killer Croc. And they really fleshed out their mythos and their background. Like Two-Face was one of my favorite stories from there. They kind of took hints from, do you remember the old episode Twilight Zone, where it was like the unrolling the bandage?
Oh yeah. And it turned out to be like he looked normal and all the doctors were ugly, that one?
Right. It was clear it was an homage from that.
This was the introduction to Mark Hamill's Joker, right? And then he became really well known as that being like one of his biggest voice acting things that he's done.
Probably his best and most well-known role ever for Mark Hamill, I'd assume.
That's what really jumped off that was his jumping off point as like a mainstream voice actor.
Well, he also played the trickster in the Flash series.
Yes.
But it was
and Returns.
And the new one too.
Yeah.
He is the most well-known in terms of Joker voice. I remember I would talk with friends about some of the later animation projects that would come out with the Batman line, and there were a few notable ones where they changed the voice of the Joker, and that just took them out of watching the animation because they were like no, that's not the Joker. It became very synonymous with that role.
Oh yeah. Maybe an honorable mention, Batman Beyond took the same Bruce as like the mentor. Like they kind of continued the storyline from that series into like the next generation. That's why I think a lot of people really liked Batman Beyond, because that came out after that, like really early 2000s, and had a lot of the same like character designs and stuff, and the same voice actors too. I think they had the same voice actor playing Bruce and everything. Yeah,
it was Kevin Conroy. Kevin Conroy did the voice for old Bruce there too. That was a continuing piece where it was still rooted in that world.
Which is great, because I think later on the animated series, they kind of, they changed it or rebooted it, like you said, and they swapped out voice actors like the Joker, which, took people out.
The DC animation has tried different things over the years, and some of it has been great in a whole lot of other levels. But this to me felt the closest to the source material. You look at something like Teen Titans Go, it's fun in irreverence, it's fun in like, in the deep cuts they make there. But it didn't feel like the actual comic. If you read Teen Titans comic book, if you read any of Jeff Johns stuff, it didn't tie into that same base necessarily in the same way.
What about regular Teen Titans? How'd you feel about the actual Teen Titans show before Teen Titans Go? Because I personally dislike Teen Titans Go a lot because they ruined Teen Titans, the animated show
Yeah.
from, maybe like a decade before it.
Yeah, I mean, well, they took it a very different direction.
Yeah.
They took it a much more frenetic, fast-paced, and just, like, don't think about this thing for too long. It's just jump, 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 which I am ADD, and, and it works really well for me. But at the same time, it feels like overload, and I can take it in like short bursts. Whereas the original one felt like you're still getting the stories. Honestly, it's like Young Justice captures that so much better. Feels more akin to something like, I say Batman animated series, but honestly, it's like Superman animated series or Justice League, both wrap into that too. I say Batman because it kind of led the charge there, and it allowed for those sprawling other series to kind of be able to pick up the torch and just kind of keep rolling with it.
I guess my first one maybe would be Adventure Time. I actually think Adventure Time is probably one of the best animated shows I've ever seen. It was so quirky and ahead of its time when it came out, and it had this really interesting overarching narrative that would kind of play out really slowly. So from afar, when you would watch episodes, every episode would seem so random. But as you continue to watch, there's lots of like plot lines that would kind of slowly come into play and kind of show up. As you, the viewer, would watch this show, you would get more and more rewarded for sticking with the show, because you would start to see these Easter eggs that would then like turn into these major plot lines down the line. You'd be like, oh, I saw that coming, or wow, I can't believe they're actually doing this, which really made it super amazing to watch. It was actually one of those shows that, like, when it ended, I was legitimately sad. I was like crying. I was like, this show's gone. Like, there's no more episodes ever. Adventure Time was one of those shows that, yeah, they had these overarching narratives that would play not only for the season, but they would play 3, 4, 5 seasons down and call back to like season 1.
I'm here with Brandon Rosenstein.
Hello. They would have these pieces in play that would actually come back into play, like years down the line. And you would be like, oh, wow, I can't believe they're bringing it back. And it did wrap really well. There was a lot more adult themes going on than what you would initially think. It had these great kind of like theories built around it. People would have these theories because occasionally they'd zoom out and show you the whole world, and the world was actually Earth. But Earth doesn't have these, candy creatures and stuff. So, over time, as the series would go on, they would kind of flash back, like, what happened to humans? What's this thing that they always refer to called the Mushroom Wars, which is actually nuclear wasteland. But there's like really adult themes that you would never expect to be hidden in this kids show. And they do it in really clever ways that I think makes it a great show to check out.
So Adventure Time's been on my list for a very long time. I've watched a scattered couple episodes here and there. I think someone told me that I could just watch it from wherever. It's still like enjoyable, but I feel like I was missing, I think, a lot of layers that and from what you're saying here too, it kind of feels like I should probably go back.
I think that's the positive of the show, though, is you could technically watch it from anywhere. If you go and actually start watching it in sequential order, you'll start to see these larger picture stories come into play. And especially in the further seasons down, they get a lot more in depth on these overarching plots, to where, like, if you were to just start randomly down there, you'd be like, wait, what the heck is happening? Why is this person here? Why is this? Where you would totally miss why all that's happening if you had skipped, whole seasons or whole chunks of an arc. Also, the thing I said about the nuclear wasteland, that's not even like a spoiler in any way. That's just such a small detail of the kind of hidden kind of theories they would have, almost reminiscent to Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls is similar, where it has all these Easter eggs. People are like, wait, does this mean something? People had that same kind of vibe going into Adventure Time, especially as it would continue to go and show you little parts of characters that you never knew existed.
That's, to me, what makes a really good show. For whatever episode it is, you are on this adventure with this cast, but at the same time, there's a lot of other things that came into this moment happening. And in that way, it makes you feel like a part of something much, much bigger. And it really draws you in.
Finn and Jake, the dog, are like the two main cast. It's interesting because you kind of see in the early seasons, the character Finn is growing up just like the voice actor is, which a lot of people don't know is that, like, the original voice actor of Finn, when it was before the series got picked up, it was one of those cartoons, which were like cartoons that would play for Cartoon Network prior to getting picked up. Who ended up voice acting it was this brother who ended up getting too old to actually voice the character. So the younger brother took over and then played Finn throughout all the seasons. And he started out, I think he must have been like 12 or something when the show first arrived. And he was voice acting it all the way up until he was like 19 or something. So he actually grew along with the character, goes through crazy amounts of changes. He starts out as a kid and he becomes a lot more like a grown adult, taking care of his own issues and his own problems. And he has problems with his parents, things that like you would normally never explore in a kid's show. He goes through and definitely makes it worth watching.
Yeah, the second one I had on my list was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Theoretically, if we went back far enough, I'd have the original Masters of the Universe on here too. But they were talking the one from like the 2002, where it was the reboot. What I really liked about this series, in addition to just like how crisp the animation was, the original Filmation version had its own unique feel and vibe to it. This had some very rich anime influences in terms of the way that they did the cuts, in terms of the way that they stylized the characters. And I felt like it really helped grow the universe and grow these worlds that we were privy to. If we're comparing this to comics, the original was more like a Jack Kirby. It felt very drug infused. Like you were on a trip watching it. This newer one felt like you had actually were plopped into very vast worlds. It expanded on the characters that you would see. It expanded on some of the more laughable characters in the original. It gave them much more depth and it gave them much more layers to them. Beastman isn't just this throwaway jokey character anymore. His presence is very ominous. It feels very large, and it feels like each and every character that is part of the rogues there, they feel like a threat in and of themselves, and they tackle that in the show too. The stories, they really bring a wealth of origin to these characters in a way that you really never got to see in the original. There's Triclops and there's Beastman and there's Merman. But here it's like you see Merman, but you also get to see the whole aquatic, world that he came from and the trials that they would deal with in their worlds. This had much more grace to it. And here, even Skeletor, you see him before he's Skeletor. You see that he's Keldor, and he was set to be king. When the previous king passed, there was this line of succession. There was a discrepancy because Keldor was like half Gar. We're throwing a wrench into the expectations. You've never had to think like this way about Skeletor before. He's still a bad guy, but it adds these extra layers of relatability where even though you know what he's doing is bad, you still care what happens to him. And when he fails in his missions, you still are like, maybe someday. Maybe someday he'll succeed, even though you don't want him to succeed because it means the guys lose, I think it did such a fantastic job of taking what came before and really adding a lot of new pieces into it and really expanding that and making these characters just really shine. And not just the old characters, but a whole cavalcade of new ones too.
I was really familiar with the original from the 80s, but I didn't even know that there was a reboot. Would you rank that over the original?
I'll say this. For the point in time that the original came out, that was my number one go-to of cartoon. If this one was the original, this one would be my number one. You need to know what has come prior to this and appreciate what came before to be able to fully get the whole scope of why this one was picked over the first one. But without the first one, it wouldn't resonate as much as it does. It's like, was Star Wars Episode 5 better than Episode 4? There's more story happening there. There's more expansion of those characters. But if you didn't have 4, you didn't have the lead up to 5, it's the same logic, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of situations where the reboot or remake of something has outperformed the original. But I also think that oftentimes with the original, people hold it to a certain standard, right? Because it also comes down to like your childhood or like rose-tinted glasses of like, well, I grew up with this and therefore it's the best. I could probably only think of a few small examples when the remake is better than the original. Even if we're speaking Star Wars, the Clone Wars, which was episode 2, they remade into like an animated series people then love because they really fleshed out a lot more. They ended up doing, I think, 7 seasons of this animated series that was originally just one arc of episode 2, but that's one of those cases where the remake, I think people largely will consider is much better. That's not quite the same as yours because most people hated episode 2, including myself, and most people loved the original Masters of the Universe. I think that's cool. I kind of wanted to see if you would think the reboot was better or not.
It's better than the live action. How about that?
Well, most things are better than the live action.
It's so canon. But like when I say canon, I'm saying like production company canon.
Yeah.
You know, but I'll take Orko over Gwildor, even though Gwildor is fun.
I think they are going to make a new live action Masters of the Universe.
The cartoon. They're making a new cartoon series that's going to be coming out soon too.
That'll be a good way to rank if this new cartoon series is better than the past remake, and if it's better than the original.
Kevin Smith is tied into this new series. From what I'm hearing, it is as if the continuation of the Filmation series kept going. I think that the look and feel will probably be more akin to Filmation. I'm very curious to see whether they still are able to capture that original tone or if it's more adult in nature. I've yet to see something geared towards kids by Kevin Smith that isn't in comic book form, right? And the comic book stuff I thought did a fantastic job, but it's still, there was nothing that he didn't also have a very heavily influenced like adult component to it also.
Now I'll talk about an anime. Yeah, so I think the problem with anime for a lot of people is that animes tend to have way too many episodes. Things like One Piece is like impossible for people to get into because there's something like 700 or 800 episodes. Nobody has time to watch all of that. I was trying to recommend animes that I thought are A, extremely well done, and B, easy to watch because there's not a million episodes. The anime that I put on here is called Gurren Lagann. It's from this anime studio that has made some of the best modern day animes. I think Studio Trigger, which made this other anime called Kill la Kill, which is really famous. They made some other one. Oh yeah, they made Darling in the Franxx, which is also another pretty okay one. The cool thing about Gurren Lagann is that it's only 24 episodes, so it's not insane. Anybody can watch it. It's not going to take you a millennia to watch it. Every episode's 30 minutes, and they do have it subbed and they have it dubbed on Netflix. With shows like this, I prefer to watch dubbed because I like to watch the action, and when I watch subbed, it takes away from a lot of beautiful animation, and this has really, really good animation. It has one of the most interesting plots as the story progresses because it's so different than what I've usually watched in a show or in a cartoon, where the show does almost like a complete 180 down the road from what you're expecting, and then it completely shifts in the second half. The synopsis of it is basically all the humans have been kind of forced underground because there's these big monsters that roam on the surface, and this kid finds what looks like a transformer head, and he figures out that he can like ride inside of this head, and basically this mecha head has the ability to take over those robot monsters that are on the surface. So then his mecha becomes bigger and bigger. You have almost like a Transformers vibe. These people get these badass mechas, but as the story progresses, it just becomes super outlandish in a way, which is very well known for Studio Trigger. They always go to the point where you're like, WTF, like this is insane. Where basically these mechas get to the point where they're the size of the moon, and then they're the size of the galaxy. So you have like a freaking transformer the size of a galaxy. It's just nuts how big they get, and it gets as insane as humanly possible. But somehow the story is still really grounded, and the character development is really well done. That I would say it's like definitely worth watching. The animation is great. Obviously, it has a lot of anime tropes where, you know, there's like some sexual innuendo and there's goofy comedy in there, and there's some dumb parts. And with the English dub, there's definitely some questionable voice acting. It's kind of can be jarring especially for new people to anime. But I would totally highly recommend that to anyone. If you like Transformers, you'll like this show. Or if you like mechas in general, or you ever even cared about like Gundam or anything, It's kind of like that, but way faster paced. It takes a lot of like the BS out, and it just gives you like a great raw story that gets progressively more and more crazy. So like set pieces are just going to get better and bigger and better and crazier from every next episode that you see. And it makes the 24 episodes go very fast.
Does it play on like the relationship between the mecha and the boy too? Is it
Totally? There's definitely that kind of anime thing of like, oh, I believe in this thing and it believes in me. And, there's like the way he's able to operate this mecha is this drill necklace that he finds, right? So it's like he kind of has a link to this robot, and over time they share that bond and they grow. And the character also grows along with, people who help raise him, because he's like a little boy. So you see the character grow within the show. Even though it's only 24 episodes, you see the character and the relationships grow significantly, which is similar to something like Kill la Kill. Gurren Lagann is like grounded enough where you can watch it and you don't have to be an anime fan to enjoy it.
Here, this reminds me of A Boy and His Dog almost, where, it's like they're on an adventure together and they make each other stronger in their own ways. Or even like Primal. I don't know if you watched this new series, Primal.
I saw a movie with Nick Cage called Primal, but no, I haven't seen a show called that.
So it's this anime series called Snake Eyes. This is by the guy who did Samurai Jack and Dexter's Laboratory.
Oh wow, I'll have to check that out. I love that animation style.
Oh, it's phenomenal. But it's like this relationship between this Neanderthal and T-Rex. It's not necessarily historically accurate, but it's two very different characters, but they work together to get through it. When it comes to the mecha stuff, I was like, and especially Transformers, like my favorite Transformers was Beast Wars.
Mine too.
Really?
Yeah, Beast Wars was the best. They had the best designs and the coolest Transformers.
Even at the time though, it was like really good animation.
I actually think it's fun to watch because you can see frames where they forgot to animate, right? Something you would never notice as a kid, like the pterodactyls trying to escape and it's not actually flying, it's just frozen in a T-pose floating up, which makes it entertaining. But I totally agree with you. They had the coolest designs and the coolest Transformers.
Well, and it just seemed very creative with how they went about it too. It drew me in more because they can emote differently. That's the thing that I could never really glom onto the original Transformers, was that it's like these are robots, and it's hard to, you're going off of how good the voice actors are, because you're just not able to emote in the same ways as seeing like Optimus Primal, or you actually see the fear, or you can see the sadness in his eyes.
Do you remember Rat Trap? Rat Trap was.
Oh, yeah. Oh man,
was goofy.
I even liked some of those like those characters that came later on too. Okay, so 3 is Venture Brothers. It feels like diabetes for my eyes. It is everything that I love in one place. The stories are just so much fun and so bonkers. You get really into the characters. They kind of all steal the spotlight. Whether it's Dr. Venture, or whether it's the kids, or whether it's the henches, every character gets their moment. And when they get that moment, you are happy they got that moment. It has so much to do with just how well they flesh them out. Being able to kind of take what we've known from these old animated series, it essentially is almost a what if. Like, what if Johnny Quest shared a world with every other cartoon? So, I mean, you get characters in there that's like, there's Scooby-Doo, there's Fantastic Four, there's G.I. Joe, the archetypes and the jingoistic components of that series. Doctor Strange, there's some really deep cuts there. It's homages, obviously, but it's just so much fun because every episode you don't know where it's going to go next. It's really thoughtful in terms of its dissection of these staples. For people who are fans of animation, this challenges you to think further than what you watched. And it makes you almost want to have a re-look at all the stuff you did watch to just see how bad some of this was.
That's a great one to put on. That's definitely one of my favorites. And there's still things that they revisit years later that totally rewards people who have been watching it since the beginning.
I'm never let down. Every episode has purpose. Every episode leads towards something that is coming down the road and stands alone in and of itself.
Number 3, Glitch Techs. It's on Netflix. It's a Netflix series. And I think now they've had 2 seasons. The animation is like incredibly crisp. They meld 2D and 3D super well, but it's mostly a 2D animated classic cartoon. The big focus of it is largely video games. I mean, it's a variety of video game genres, from like very old video games to more modern day video games and VR and stuff like that. But the cool thing about it, if you're a gamer like myself, there's a lot of pop culture references in it that are specific to people who grew up playing games. Basically, the premise of the show is that a game glitches, and when a game glitches, it actually means that some aspect of that game comes out to real life and starts messing with things. Let's say you were playing some fighting game, and then one of the characters from the fighting game actually came out and started like terrorizing the city. That's kind of the premise of it. It's really simple, but it's really awesome. They do a lot of references to really popular games that you would know about, but obviously they'll change it slightly because of licensing, and you'd be like, oh, I clearly know what this character is based off of. And then they also have things like Tetris, like a Tetris block will somehow, glitch, and Tetris blocks will fall from the sky and start destroying the city. So they got to figure out a way to fix that, right? It's really rewarding for people who grew up with games. And also I think it's just really entertaining style of animation where it's flashy and fast paced. So it's kind of in the same vein of Teen Titans Go, where episodes fly by really fast and they're usually really entertaining. And I think that's definitely worth a watch. I think it's a great show.
I've always loved that idea. I mean, there's been TV shows that have been similar to that. I don't think there's ever been an animated that I can think of that has done specifically that. But like, I think of there's one that was like with this the prison. It was Alcatraz. So it was a J.J. Abrams show. I think it came right after Lost. I think they expected something like Lost, and I think maybe that's why it didn't continue as long as it did. It only lasted for, I think, a season. It was wonderful. There was some freak accident that allowed for these prisoners to come into modern day and wreak havoc in modern day. It was up to the warden or someone had to go back, like try and rein them back in. But there's another series that was back in even like the 80s, I think, or the early 90s, where it was with Christopher Lloyd, and it was kind of the live action version of what you're explaining, of what Glitch Text is. Characters from video games came out into the real world. Christopher Lloyd's character, I think, it's been a while, so I can't remember if he was the bad guy or if he was the guy who, was like trying to go back and collect them. But every episode felt really very genre based on whoever the villain was super corny and super fun. Thanks for joining us today, guys. That was our very first SpeekyGeeky podcast. We hope you follow us weekly for more SpeekyGeeky. Take care.
Bye.